for my second talk, which was the one that I actually intended to give. Here we're also talking about secure aggregation, surprise, but the setting is going to be slightly different. So this is going to be in the classical secure aggregation setting that has a single server at the center, as well as it's used usually in an iterated fashion for things like federated learning. So we don't care about huge sparse domains, but more like aggregating vectors that can be still very long, but at least not exponentially long. And the title was originally this, but then we got some feedback recently that asynchronous might be something that people misunderstand, like asynchronous clients, asynchronous networks, and so on. So we chose to change it. It's now about one-shot clients. So clients basically send a single message and disappear, but we don't make any claims about the network being asynchronous. So yeah, the setting here. Again, we have lots and lots of clients. So everything in these talks is about like huge numbers of clients, I think millions. And each client contributes a value in that is a vector. So we're not talking about sparse domain anymore, but just say a vector of length 1 million again. And central server just wants to compute the sum of all the clients. So typical use case here is federated learning, where you have the setting where a server has some candidate model, wants to continue to train it, so for example fine-tune it, by sending it to all of the devices. The devices locally perform a training step on the model, and then send updates, so gradient updates back to the server. But we don't want to learn the individual client's training step, because that would reveal something about the private data. We only want to learn the completed aggregated gradients, which allows us to give us the next iteration of the model. So yeah, can this be done with a central untrusted server? So not in the two-server setting, but just a single server. In particular, where we have malicious security and we have many client devices. So security properties that we're aiming for here is that the server may collude with any number of clients. In practice, like for parts of the protocol, we will have some honestly assumption about parts of the clients, but in general, for the inputs, we assume that the server may know the inputs of the majority of the clients. And functionality-wise, we want to receive either the correct output or we want to abort. So there's no changing the outputs. Attacks that are possible that we know of in the setting, but that we're not going to cover in this talk, is inputs that malicious clients can provide. So we know there are range proofs that we can use for these clients to make sure that the inputs are in a certain range. So we don't care about the malicious clients' inputs. And also Sybil attacks, right? So if the server knows most of the client's inputs, it can deduce something about individual client's inputs. Again, we know we can add differential privacy here. We're not going to talk about DP in this talk. But that's something that's composable with this problem. So what we propose is a new single server secure aggregation protocol. Clients are one shot, so they send a single message, disappear, and that's something that wasn't present in prior works, at least not under the same constraints, because we also don't require a public key infrastructure for clients. So the clients don't have to have an identity or a public key. They can just show up, have some kind of verification, authentication, but they don't have to have long-lived keys of each other. And they send the messages. Paper is going to appear any moment now. We didn't make it before this talk, unfortunately. Okay, outline of the talk. I will give a little bit of background of how secure aggregation was implemented in the past. So what kinds of protocols do we know of? Then I will go in the semi-honest server version of a protocol. So that's a semi-honest server with malicious clients. And then achieving malicious security with both malicious servers and malicious clients. Okay, so for the background, we have the original SecAg protocol. So this is something that came out of Google Research in 2017. And in that original protocol, we perform aggregation using secret sharing. So clients essentially secret share their inputs with each other, or in this graph of clients, they choose neighbors, and with each neighbor, they secret share their input. In addition, they use a so-called self-mask to mask the inputs. So we have two kinds of masks. Some of them are secret shared with neighboring clients, and some of them the client keeps to itself. They send the masked inputs to the server who can perform the aggregation locally. And now the question is, how can we unmask? And for that, basically, if the client is still alive at this point, so if the client after the aggregation still responds, it can just send its self-mask and the server can cancel it. Whereas the pairwise masks that clients choose with their neighbors, they will cancel each other if both clients showed up. The issue is what happens if clients drop out. Now, for dropouts, and that was the main contribution of that work, there's a way to recover the client's self-mask in case it didn't make it to the final round. And that is, in addition to these pairwise masks, the clients also secret share their self-mask with the neighbors. So if the neighbors can agree that this client in fact disappeared, so that it's not a route anymore, then they will send the client secret to recover it. So now if we have this honest majority assumption among clients, then in fact this protocol is private and doesn't really lag. In subsequent work, so here we see the 2020 and 2023 improvements to that setting. We managed to reduce the overhead of the masking. So in particular, the number of clients each client has to talk to was reduced to logarithmic in the number of clients. So that's actually quite efficient. And then this ACON paper, the 2023 one, provides also input validation for the clients. So efficient zero-knowledge proofs of client inputs. What all of these have in common, though, is that clients have to wait for each other. So this is a very synchronous setting where the clients have to be online all at the same time because they have to exchange masks with each other. And while they don't communicate with each other directly, so we don't need to have peer-to-peer communication, they do that via the server, but still they have to be around. And that's a bottleneck in practice. So if you think, okay, we have clients not showing up all the time, but they're like maybe at a rate of 10 per second, and we want, I don't know, 10,000 clients to be around, well, then we need 1,000 seconds, right, just to have enough clients. And they actually need to be around for 1,000 seconds, so they kind of disappear in the meantime. So the issue that we see in practice is that clients show up, and we start collecting them until we have as many as we need. But then by the time we get to that number, the first already start dropping out. And so it's very hard to run this protocol in practice, even though like the actual communication overhead is not as big. It's just the waiting time that's too long. So to solve these issues, there were proposals that don't require all the clients to be online all the time, but instead to have some clients that are very reliable to come together into a committee that performs like the important part of the computation, whereas all the other clients become much more lightweight. So this is here the Flamingo work that I'm showing. There are other works that work in a similar spirit. And instead of secret sharing your mask with neighboring clients and some graph that is imposed over all the clients, you secret share it with this committee of clients. This decryptor or this committee of clients then comes together in order to do the unmasking step. So in the final unmasking step, not all the clients have to be around, just the committee has to be around. You can achieve one-shot client with this setup. So in fact, the clients could be not synchronous, but just send one message and disappear. But this would come at the cost of a PKA with all the clients. So if we don't assume a PKA, then this protocol still requires a synchronization point between clients. Okay, and then finally, what can we do if we want to get away with all this masking? Because the issues in these previous protocols was that we have to wait for the clients for each other to perform these masking and unmasking steps. So can we somehow get away without doing that? And one natural thing that comes to mind is homomorphic encryption. So one baseline protocol that you could think of is the client, instead of doing this secret sharing of masks with its neighbors, it just takes a homomorphic encryption scheme under which it encrypts its ciphertext. The decryption key of that is secret shared between this committee again. And now we just send that to the server. The server can homomorphically aggregate and then have the committee decrypt the values. All right, so one problem that we have here is that the decryption, the communication of the decryptors depends on the input length. So if we have pretty long vectors here, that means we have to upload long vectors as clients, then the committee has to download these long vectors after aggregation and has to upload that again, so we would like to do away with that. There's a second problem with this protocol also that I'm going to go into a bit later. So what does our problem do? What does our protocol do? Well, instead of doing the aggregation directly on only the, we do the aggregation on the encrypted inputs as well. but we have a homomorphic encryption scheme that is key and value homomorphic. So in fact, we don't need to send to the decryptor the sum of all the vectors, but instead we send to the decryptor the sum of all the keys. And this will give us a decryption of a summed up key, and that one will be able to decrypt the final sum vector. So the server is the only party that needs to download data proportional to the vector size, to the output size. And yeah, so here's the protocol in detail. The client uses this key and value homomorphic encryption scheme to sample a random key and then use that key to encrypt its input. And then it encrypts the key under a regular homomorphic encryption scheme. Sends both to the server sums up both, and lets the committee decrypt the sum of keys, and then finally decrypts the values using the sum of keys. So again, one thing I want to note here, that the decryptor also could be implemented by a second server. So if you want like this two-server model for some reason, then also this can be implemented as that, and it has a nice property that the second server is lightweight, so it doesn't need to communicate proportional to the vector length. It could also be implemented by a trusted execution environment if you choose to believe in such things, or a combination of these, right? So you can have a committee where one party of them is like a strong server, one party is RTE, and you have the best of all worlds in terms of security guarantees. Here I will just focus on the committee setting, just to keep things easy. So, okay, a recap of the simplified protocol was, as I said, we just decrypt the sums of keys. Now, one issue that we have, if we just implement it like that, is that we can choose ciphertext maliciously based on other client ciphertext. So in this threat model, where we have a semi on a server who can see all the client's contributions, and a malicious client that is controlled by the same adversary, that would allow the malicious clients to, for example, choose as inputs the sum of all the encryptions of the other parties. Now, that would, in the final output, right, reveal something about some target client. So for example, we could wait until we have n-1 inputs. We set the end input to the negated sum of all these n-1, and then our target client appears and gets aggregated with a 0. So we don't want that. The solution here is to use a zero knowledge proof of knowledge that each client has to produce, and that protects against this attack by malicious clients. And there are many zero knowledge proofs of knowledge we can use here. I'm not going to go into details, but for those who saw Daniel's talk yesterday, there were some interesting candidates there, and we also in our paper have some construction based on bulletproofs and combination of those. So yeah, now the question is, well, what else do we need to solve? Well, this decryptor here, so here it's put in a very simple way that just this decryptor committee generates a key, or the decryptor committee just computes the decryption of the key. But of course, in practice, this has to be implemented as an efficient protocol, and for that, we need a threshold decryption scheme. So we need a threshold key generation, and also we need a threshold decryption protocol. And the nice thing, again, we're using additively homomorphic encryption here based on RWE. So the key generation actually comes down to locally generating a key share. And the thing that we need for the key generation is to prove that we've done it correctly. Otherwise, we can, again, impose attacks here by malicious clients or malicious committee members. For the distributed decryption, we also need to prove that we've done that correctly. But again, the same kinds of zero knowledge proofs that the clients do, they also play a part here in the distributed decryptor. So yeah, we have a solution for those. This doesn't solve everything though. So this solves the issue with the semi on the server and malicious clients. But against malicious servers, we have additional problems. And some of them might be familiar from the previous talk. For example, we could take a client's contribution and just repeat it multiple times. We could drop a client's contribution. And again, we can fake malicious clients, we can spawn clients, whatever. So the second and third, like dropping contributions or creating fake clients, we cannot solve without action assumptions. So we're not going to attempt to. But for the first one, we can find something that we can do here, right? So we can make sure that the first client's contribution cannot be, or that a client's contribution cannot be repeated, and that, for example, allows us to use DP to mitigate number 3. So yeah, our solution to this first problem, to repeated inclusions, is that the server provides to the decryptors, before asking for decryption of the key, provides a proof that the sum that it computed is in fact the sum of n different clients. So it doesn't choose, say, which clients, it just says these are n different clients, and it can prove that. And for that, we introduce another role to this committee. This can be implemented by the same clients, so it doesn't have to be like a separate party or whatever, but we chose to call it the verifier just to distinguish it from the decryptor work that it does. And yeah, quick overview of how that works. So the clients, in addition to proving the proof of knowledge for the input, they also make this proof include in the VHME construction, they include their client ID. So basically, they hash their client ID and include that in the knowledge proof. And then using these commitments that they have to the inputs, the server can then homomorphically compute a commitment to the sum. And the verifier now only has to check that all of the proofs that it got for the clients are valid, and that in fact this commitment, the commitment to the sum that is computed homomorphically, is in fact a commitment to the sum that the server claims it wants to decrypt. This can be done in a publicly verifiable way, so this can be done by the public, but again, it can also be done by this committee. Now, how can we implement this role efficiently? So this abstract verifier role, how can we implement this efficiently in a committee? And for that, we use this aggregation tree structure. So think of a Merkle tree where basically the nodes include hashes of the children nodes, but instead we also add commitments that sum up in each node. So at the root of the tree, we have a commitment to the final vector that we want to decrypt, as well as the actual value. And then at each intermediate node, we just have this commitment, and at the leaf nodes, we have the client proofs that the client provided in the beginning. And now we can choose contiguous intervals of the leaf node. So think of these boxes as containing multiple leaf nodes. And for each of these intervals, we have a separate committee. So as long as we have honest majority in each of these committees, we just need to ensure that that we get a response for each of these committees to check whether this tree is consistent. So what the committees would do is check all the proofs that correspond to their interval, then check that the aggregation to the root is done correctly, so that in fact it's the same tree, and the tree computes the right sum. And then the decryptors just have to wait for enough signatures for each of the intervals to ensure this honest majority before they start decrypting. So that is the final protocol, and in fact it can be instantiated in a way. So if we choose a number of verifiers or committee members correctly, it can be instantiated that each committee member does sublinear amount of work. So here is a plot that compares our communication overhead of committee members to the prior work, Flamingo, and you can see here that we scale sublinearly if we choose, for example, square root n as the committee size. If we take a constant committee size, we scale linearly. So if you have a setting where you have very powerful clients, then maybe that's an option as well. With that, I'd like to conclude my talk, and again, take questions for both of the talks.
Well, thanks. It was a very clear presentation, I think. So I hope, and I think there are not too many questions. So maybe one quick question. Then, well, let's thank the speakers of the session again and go for the coffee break.
All right. Before going into the coffee break, we have good news. We can stay in this room for the whole conference. So all the afternoon sessions will happen here as well. No need to go outside and enjoy the sun in between, but you can, of course. We have a coffee break until 11:10 and then meet again here in this room, and the rest of the conference stays just here. Enjoy the break. See you later.